right, good morning, everybody. Thank you all for showing up this morning to officially welcome back Kelly Krauskopf as President of Basketball Business Operations for the Indiana Fever.
What if the WNBA's establishment is secretly trying to destroy the one person who has the capacity to propel the league to new heights? Millions of fans feel that Caitlin Clark is a target of a secret battle because of a series of shocking on-court incidents, bitter off-court comments, and a callous decision from the highest levels of authority. Even though this may seem like a crazy fantasy, the reality of this unfolding tale reveals a league at conflict with its own wealth and is far darker and more complex than anyone could have imagined. Caitlin Clark's election by the Indiana Fever with the first overall pick was heralded as a momentous occasion that would alter the trajectory of women's professional basketball. She wasn't your typical talented rookie. She was a cultural force of nature and a ratings supernova who had drastically changed record books in college audiences. Her matches were attracting more people than MLB playoff games and Stanley Cup finals. On her own, the league was compelled to convert from public aircraft to private charters. She was a chosen one, the golden goose. For years, veterans have been advocating for this change. Arenas that used to have an abundance of empty seats were selling out in minutes, and secondary market ticket prices were reaching previously unheard of levels. Caitlin Clark had an instantaneous, noticeable, and sincere influence. Everything was set up for a spectacular coronation, a hero's professional debut that would elevate the sport overall. Rather, she was cruelly and relentlessly baptized by fire. The welcome mat was taken from under her and replaced with a gauntlet. Her first game made it terrifyingly clear that this would not be an easy transition. The physicality was on an entirely new plane. In addition to occupying space, defenders were bigger, more powerful, and faster. They were sending a message with every forceful screen, shove, and bump. But this was not merely a strong, expert defense. It was quite personal. It was a targeted, merciless campaign that seemed to have been meticulously orchestrated to punish her, imprison her, and cause her to question her place in this league. And that unspoken message was going to be expressed in the most obvious, irrefutable way possible, setting off a chain reaction of disagreement that would lift the curtain and expose the gloom, mash the resentful underbelly of the league. The hits she was taking on the court were just the start of a horrific story. Everyone in the sports world realized something was severely, horribly wrong during a heated game against the Chicago Sky. Fighting for position wasn't a hard screen or a tough box out under the rim. A vicious blindside shoulder check that had no place in a basketball game was delivered by Kennedy Carter. Carter not only committed a foul, but also assaulted Caitlin Clark. Clark fell violently to the ground after a cheap, cowardly, and obvious shot that was delivered far from the ball. As soon as the play went viral, the entire world sent out a united cry of protest. This was not a welcome to the league moment. This message was delivered with malicious intent and was an intentional attempt to do harm. Carter's haughty refusal to answer any questions about the incident that followed further fueled the flames, along with her girlfriend Angel Reese's evident, joyful jubilation on the sidelines. This one terrible incident, which came to symbolize everything that was wrong, exposed the deep-seated anger and hatred that many had suspected were simmering beneath the league's surface. The WNBA's pathetic initial response, a common foul that was only elevated to a flagrant one after harsh public criticism, told fans everything they needed to know. The league's biggest star would not be protected. Caitlin Clark was by herself. This conflict involves multiple players from a single squad. The entire league was affected by the phenomena. The movement was organized by veterans who felt she hadn't earned her stripes or paid her dues. But from a place no one wanted to believe, her own locker room, a far more horrifying tale began to emerge. As the season progressed, a very alarming trend surfaced that was impossible for internet detectives, retired players, professional basketball gurus, and to ignore while everyone else was talking about the foul and the league's cowardice. Caitlin Clark, who is arguably the best shooter in the world, would be wide open on the perimeter, hands up, repeatedly pleading for the ball, only to have her teammates ignore her. The tape was undeniable. Passes would be forced into players who were double covered in the paint while Clark stood alone, ensuring 3 points. The camaraderie among the Indiana Fever on the court was more than just odd. It looked broken, shattered, and sometimes deliberately sabotaged. irritated body language, and glances at the bench. The group gained notoriety for its intense, silent huddles. The conversation that erupted on social media gave rise to a disturbing and increasingly compelling conspiracy idea. Her own squad was deliberately limiting her touches and shutting her out in order to keep her stats low and humble her. Were they jealous of the unprecedented amount of media attention, the massive multi-million-dollar Nike contract that came with a trademark sneaker, and the undeniable fact that a 22-year-old rookie was now the focal point of the team's identity? Despite season standout Aaliyah Boston's enigmatic post-game comments, these doubts persisted. When reporters questioned her about the seeming lack of chemistry, her answers were often succinct, evasive, and full of corporate jargon, implying a deeper displeasure she was reluctant to voice in public. The narrative was rapidly evolving from a simple tale of a novice struggling to adapt to the horrifying possibility of an internal uprising in addition to her opponents, with the players who were supposed to be her allies also purposely destroying this generational potential. This internal struggle created the perfect storm, a disorderly and distrusting environment. The court was not the only place where the animosity existed. The powerful old guard in the league was preparing to give a message that was much more obvious, official, and damaging. It was being amplified in the media by the league's most respected speakers. Veteran performers from both the past and the present might begin a clandestine but persistent attempt to downplay her significance and normalize the brutal treatment she was enduring. The most famous example was WNBA legend Diana Taurasi, who, even before she was recruited, coldly predicted Clark's approaching reality. A comment that, looking back, looks less like an objective analysis and more like a foreboding prediction or even a threat. The obvious fact that no rookie in the history of professional sports has ever entered a league with such a bullseye on their back is conveniently ignored. The continuous aggression is justified by other players and commentators who callously dismiss it as normal for any rookie. Talking about the incredibly sensitive mechanics of a white player being well known in the league with a sizable black population inevitably made the conversation more disingenuous and complex. As many correctly pointed out, the media's relentless savior narrative unjustly and unwittingly destroyed the incredible legacies of the black women who had worked in relative obscurity for years to build the WNBA from the ground up. This resulted in a perfect storm of cultural conflict, professional jealousy, and righteous outrage. The new phenomenon, which signaled a significant shift in the financial and cultural landscape of sports and music, and the old guard, who believed their huge accomplishments were being mercilessly disregarded, engaged in an ideological war. The rising tide that draws all boats to them wasn't her. Everything they had worked so hard to establish was in danger of being destroyed by the tidal wave of hype that was her. The choice made at the highest level of the sport due to the simmering unspoken conflict that was about to become an official unquestioned policy would leave millions of fans astonished, perplexed, and utterly duped. The most devastating proof that Caitlin Clark was being aggressively targeted by powerful institutional forces rather than a competitor, athlete, or a jealous teammate came from the committee entrusted with representing the United States of America abroad. In a decision that defied all rationales, financial, competitive, and otherwise, Caitlin Clark was left off of the USA Olympic team for the Paris Games. The decision stunned the whole world of international sports. It was incomprehensible. This was the world's most watched, most talked about, and most popular basketball player, a woman who recently demonstrated that she could bring Super Bowl-level viewership to a niche sport. Additionally, she was informed that she lacked the necessary skills to serve as a reserve. The formal explanations provided by the committee were blatantly offensive, flimsy, and evident. They brought up her alleged lack of senior national team experience and her ambiguous wish for unity within the team. Even though some of the players who did make the squad had less experience or were having statistically poorer seasons, everyone with a head recognized the real reason. This was the most effective gatekeeping measure available. The official declaration of the establishment shouted from the ivory tower of American basketball, "You are not one of us. We don't care how well known you are, how many fans you have, or how much money you earn. This exclusive club has not extended an invitation to you." It was a terrible, self-defeating decision. Given that it was clearly driven by pride, politics, and personal feelings, it felt like a formal declaration of war against the future of their own sport. As the world went crazy and the sports media went berserk, all eyes were on the front office of the Indiana Fever. They had just been publicly humiliated on a global scale by their franchise player, their golden goose, and the only source of their renewed significance. All of their true allegiances would be revealed by their response. With their star player at the center of a global storm, the globe excitedly awaited the Indiana Fever organization's return. Fans, commentators, and sponsors all expected a passionate, emotional defense of their star. They anticipated a strong press release criticizing the Olympic Committee's ridiculous decision and a public declaration of unwavering support for their distressed child. Rather, they encountered a soul-crushing silence and a loud, purposeful, President Lynn Dunn and the rest of the front staff only make corporate-approved remarks about Fever, the WNBA season, Caitlin's bright future, and the importance of the long term. There was absolutely no emotion, no rage, no fire, and no conflict. And in that dreadful moment of inaction, the terrible decision from the video's title was finally revealed. There was not a single hard foul or a controversial roster snub. Not fighting for their most valuable asset was a difficult strategic choice for the Indiana Fever. To avoid upsetting the league's powerful and resentful elite, they chose to play the political game rather than speak up for the individual who was financially sponsoring their team's recovery on their own. It was a heartbreaking betrayal, a clear declaration to Clark that she was a commodity, an asset to be managed and profited from, rather than a player to be supported and defended. They sold her jerseys by the truckload and excitedly packed their arena to the rafters. But when it came time to protect her from the well-established old guard, they shied away. Even her own organization was willing to momentarily endanger her well-being in order to maintain their tenuous position within the league's harsh and ruthless power structure, as evidenced by this cruel economic calculation. This deliberate stillness and the Olympic snub expose a terrible truth about the cruelty of professional sports. At the core of the vast struggle lies a basic confrontation between two powerful opposing forces, the inflexible established culture and the unstoppable money machine. Caitlin Clark is the money. Her rookie salary is an incredibly low $76,000, which she most likely earns for the league in a quarter of a single game. She is personally responsible for generating tens of millions of dollars for the WNBA overall. Teams that use to play in small crowds and little college gyms are suddenly full 20,000-seat NBA venues because she is on the opposing team. The league's national broadcast rights contract, which is predicted to rise in value from a pitiful $60 million to potentially over $240 million, is almost entirely due to her involvement. She is the most valued asset in the history of women's professional sports by any possible financial metric. She must, however, contend with a deeply embedded culture, as well as an elderly generation of executives and veterans who feel disregarded, degraded, and vehemently opposed to the radical change she advocates. Instead of seeing her rapid rise as a gift of sport, they see it as a personal slight, a challenge to their established hierarchy and their hard-won history. Right now, the league is involved in a confusing, harmful dichotomy. Despite S tremendous desire for the money, significance, and public visibility that Caitlin Clark brings, it appears fundamentally reluctant to embrace the cultural upheaval that inevitably accompanies her. Important decision-makers appear to be prioritizing the wounded egos of a few powerful veterans over the long-term financial security and quick growth of the entire company, from the Olympic Selection Committee to the league's own front office. This struggle, which makes absolutely no business sense, reveals a league at war with itself, with its biggest star caught in the crossfire. Given her concerns about opponents on the floor, the potential for coldness in her own locker room, and the league office's startling decisions that go against its own best interests, what is Caitlin Clark's probable future in the WNBA? Right now, one of the most thrilling, volatile, and high-stakes sagas in modern sports history is unfolding. Caitlin Clark is the WNBA's unquestionable savior, as well as its biggest evident problem. She is a generational athlete with unicorn talent who has to deal with intense media scrutiny, a highly physical style of play on the court, and a broader sports discourse that often places her at the center of conflicting narratives. At this critical point in the league's history, there is no going back. Unprecedented growth, global recognition, and substantial financial expansion are all facilitated by this new age of celebrity visibility. The other path is one of tradition, established hierarchy, and resistance to rapid change. There won't be a single decision or plot element that dictates what happens next. It will rely on how the league, its players, and its fans resolve the tension between preserving what has been built over decades and embracing the momentum of a new era. A path that might turn off millions of new fans, squander a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and mishandle the greatest gift the sport has ever been given. The question that remains is terrifying. Is the WNBA elite so absorbed by its own tradition and vanity that it is willing to kill its own golden goose in order to make a point? Or is this relentless, brutal, and seemingly endless trial by fire a carefully thought-out strategy to make her a legend so unquestionable, resilient, and unstoppable that she can no longer be ignored or denied? The solution to that problem will impact not only Caitlin Clark's career, but also the future of the WNBA as a whole. To ensure you don't miss anything, please leave your opinions in the comments section, subscribe, and turn on all notifications. Once you click the video on the screen, we'll see you in the next one.